All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we had both listened to, I listened to the whole interview. You listened to a clip, I think, of Konstantine Kissin on modern wisdom. And he was asked and addressed the situation when Sam Harris was on Triggernometry and what he felt about it and the aftermath of everything. And you had some comments about that, which we haven't discussed yet. And I also have some comments about it as well. And we can riff off that because it really kind of goes in a lot of directions, depending on what your comments are.
Hmm. Well, and the reason it goes in a lot of directions is,
Well, do you want me to summarize it first?
uh, yeah, let's start
Okay,
there.
so for those that haven't seen the clip, it's a 20-minute clip of a 2-hour interview, but it does get the context of that whole
Mhm.
conversation because they really don't discuss that in any of the other parts of it. Maybe a little mention here or there, but he Williamson asked Kissin, sorry,
They must protect you from, I don't know, the mailman or something.
or the neighbor or whatever. The this actually this time of day it is the lady that walks her two dogs out there, and she has a special needs kid too that she walks with, and they seem to like the kid, which is great because my I'm glad my dog isn't going to go attack somebody who's special needs, but the other dog always like tries to protect the kid, so it makes it difficult. So they're fighting through the fence usually. But okay, so back to the interview. He asked him uh, what happened in the aftermath. How did he feel about it? Does he regret that went out or things along those lines? And Kissin's answer was first he likes Sam. They're good. They're not good friends, but they're friends. And he first reached out to him to see how he's doing because he knows how the mob can be.
Yeah.
And the mob's not good for anybody. I don't wish that on anybody. It sucks because it's kind of what keeps these public figures in check. But at the same time, the mobs are on both sides, so they kind of just mob each other. And so he talked about that, and then they went into he set it up by saying, part of our show, and if you've never watched Trigonometry, they're very good at doing this, is making their guests feel comfortable so they can just, talk without feeling like they're being blindsided by anything.
Hmm.
And this was a conversation that we've talked about on our show before, where it got into the cabal basically that was the keep Trump out of office, the censorship, the hiding of the Biden laptop, the uh everything that went into it, and we'll get more into that because that's the part of it that Kissin left out. uh but that was the original question to Sam, and then he made the dead babies comment, which
Hmm.
we've played on here and we've discussed ad nauseum. I'll have to link the episode if anybody wants to go back to that. But then they started talking about Dylan Mulvaney as well with the Bud Light thing, and Williamson asked how they were similar, and he tried to parse them apart. And
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's where you have your problem. Uh,
Yes and no. So, for my first comment is one of the reasons Williamson is so good, is
well,
really,
one of the reasons he's so good is exactly what I said. He makes his guests comfortable to say whatever they need to say.
but going back to the very beginning, it's a 20-minute clip. They really only talked about the Sam Harris thing for 5 or 6 minutes because they very quickly spun off into the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about
Well,
this thing that
what
happened.
should have been the bigger picture, but then he tried to separate them.
Yes, well, Kissin kind of that's where I thought, the other reason Williamson is good is because he's brought in somebody who thinks differently from him and, you know, gives him something new, which is the idea that Harris, it wasn't personal to Harris, was Kissin's main
Mm-hmm.
point is this is Harris is a symbol. Harris is an avatar of the intellectual elite. And I'm adding on to what Kissin said because I think there's even more to it, which is that Harris is an avatar of the Trump derangement, anti-Trump
Well,
crazies.
he's an avatar of the intellectual left that is not woke.
Well, in this instance, though, I think he's getting lumped into the
Well,
woke.
and that's the mistake of the people attacking him. He was part of the cabal, but he's an institution guy. He's not part of the woke. And well, I say institution guy. He is a grew up privileged white liberal guy that has too much time on his hand to do DMT and write books. But so it's a good life, right?
Mhm.
And he's part of that Hillary Clinton crowd, which is the deplorables. That's different than the crowd that is the y'all are all the racist bigots. The
Mhm.
deplorables are the stupid people. And there is an educated class that doesn't want to be part of the stupid people so bad that they will do anything to fight it.
And there's a wide swath of resentment at, and this is where I think it is a little bit unfair because Harris is a decent person who is an honest intellectual, but I think he gets lumped into the intellectual elitism, not the intellectual elite. I think I've talked about this before. There's a difference between elite and elitism. And I think there's a wide swath of the people that Trump appealed to that are sick and tired of the, oh, you have advanced degrees, so you automatically think not just that you're smarter than me, but that you're better than me.
Well, he is not woke, but he's also not a populist. And that's where he stands. And he's sitting on a razor's edge
Yes.
of his preferred party. And I put his book Free Will right there up there. And he also wrote a book called Lying and a book called The Moral Landscape, which is where I'm going to go with this after you kind of
Mm.
give your synopsis, because that is the part of the symbol. And he goes on and on about what affects our free will. But he is, as much as he talks, there's was Sad call him the Malibu meditator, right? As much as he talks about meditating and learning your own mind, there is still this bias within him.
Yes.
And I really think this bias is based on the fact that he doesn't want to be one of the dumb people.
And I think that's part of that underlying resentment that Kissin didn't really get into is that again the context that you brought up of what specifically was he talking about there. He was talking about the 2020 election, and go back to the 2016 election and the clip that we've played of Michael Moore, wonder of wonders, as much of an obnoxious twat as I think he is, he actually does kind of tap into and understand a section of the populace that the rest of the left doesn't want to understand. And that's the what the deplorables, as you talked about it, and for more specifically because he's from Michigan, it's that Midwest rust belt blue collar people who feel like they have been
You use the right words there. It is the white collar versus the blue collar.
Mm,
It really is
exactly.
that
And so
distinction.
specifically, the reason, one of the big reasons I think this blew up so much on Sam is that, like I said, he became an avatar of the intellectual elitism that said, "You're so stupid, you great unwashed morons." And also racists out in the middle of the country, you can't be trusted to do the most fundamental and sacred thing of a democratic republic, and that is vote. We're going to fortify this election because you can't be trusted to make the right decision. So there was an added element there on top of what, adding to what Kissin was saying, that I think strengthened why this blew up so much. As Kissin said, because Sam said the quiet part out loud. This is what a lot of, especially the real hardcore Trump people, but even the Trump adjacent, who just, people like me who didn't vote for him in 2016 and then thought, oh, he's not the monster I thought he was going to be. I mean, he's not the
Well,
savior genius that his supporters say
and
he is, but
even left leaning people like myself that didn't vote for him in 2016, but also realized who we had on the left side. We have 40 years, 50 years of evidence of him being a corrupt, lying individual. My thing about it truly was a vote against Biden.
Hmm.
It wasn't a vote for Trump.
Hmm.
And that's the thing. It's you're willing to ignore all of this about one person because Trump bad.
Hmm.
And I still haven't, and to your point, I haven't seen the engaging argument of how he is the meteor crashing towards Earth, which was the analogy made in that same interview with the damn
Yes.
baby.
Yeah.
He's the asteroid coming towards Earth. We would trust in the people to take care of it, which is his version of Trump is the meteor, so we trusted in Time Magazine and Mark Zuckerberg and me. He's part of it. That's the problem. That's part of the
Yes.
dissonance. He was part of it, and
And,
he's partly to blame for everything that's going wrong
and
right
so
now.
here's the new thought, the big thought, or at least I hope the big thought is where so Kissing kind of touched on this, but didn't really explicitly say it when Williamson's talking about um how did he phrase it? The grace that people, especially right-leaning people, want when they defend people who have been canceled and say, well, you can't just ruin someone because of one thing they said, and they don't want to extend that grace. And Kissin made a good point of, well, but to a lot of these people who are outraged at Harris and then outraged as Williamson brought up Bud Light, it's not just one thing. It's
Mhm.
Anheuser-Busch represents this cabal of corporate elite who, as the BlackRock guy says out loud, you have to force change. That
Mhm.
again, back to the you big, dumb, unwashed, racist masses, you can't be trusted to make the right decision. So we're gonna force you to change your mind.
Well, and the more Kissen talked about trying to differentiate Harris from the Mulvaney situation, the more he supported the people who were upset. Because this is the power of the lack of free will that we refuse to accept. There might be some. I can't say there's none, but it's a lot less than you think. And Kissen is describing everything that Harris did, but he won't attach it to his friend. He wants to give him the benefit of the doubt because he knows him personally.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing someone personally and knowing how they are in every other situation of their life doesn't excuse the one bad thing they did. I was out with one of my buddies the other day, and we're always cool, and we always uh he's a good person in most ways. And then there was a situation where he got a little hot under the collar with another guy there, and I had to pull him out of there. And I don't agree with, because I wouldn't have pulled him out of there if I agreed with the fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to pull him out of there because he was acting
and
irrationally.
and
And
you're getting to my main point. What I'm building up to here is what Williamson is missing is that it's not just you shouldn't, and maybe this is a flaw on the part of the people who lean right that he's talking about. It's not just that you shouldn't cancel someone because of one thing. It's, is it right or is it wrong? Because Kissin talks about this when he talks about, but he didn't really drill home the point that what's wrong with Harris here is that he has grossly overestimated the threat, not just of Trump, but they also talked about COVID a little bit. That
mhm,
if you think COVID is the Spanish flu, then you're more justified in your own mind for taking extreme measures. I mean,
mhm.
millions of people died because of the Spanish flu, and it was an outbreak that lasted a long time. There were like 2 or 3 waves of it over a year, and so
Or
if you,
even something more recent, MERS. MERS
mhm,
was way more deadly. It just wasn't as
it was just a
transmissible.
lot smaller,
And,
yeah.
and and it was in an area that doesn't have as much international travel. So those were the two saving graces there. It was a little less transmissible, and the Arabic nations just don't have as much international
Hmm.
travel.
So what one of the examples Williamson brought up was um Roseanne. I almost said Rosie
Yeah,
O'Donnell
yeah,
because that was in my brain for another reason. Anyway,
because you
no, because I was
you getting the
listening to it.
Vaseline ready for after this.
Exactly. No, I
As
was
long as you don't
listening
do
to
it on air, like so
a
many
Dinesh
videos of
D'Souza
people
interview,
coming
and
out.
he reminded me of something ridiculous that she had done. Anyway, um, so he brings up the Roseanne clip, and it's not just that, hey, don't cancel Roseanne because of this one thing she said. It's not even just oh, they took her out of context. As he said, it is the most egregious out of context I've seen in a long time. It's a flat out lie.
No,
She
I'm
was
sorry.
canceled on a flat out
The
lie.
most egregious out of context was Very Nice People,
Okay. Yes.
because that changed the world.
That's a good
That
point.
out of context clipping changed the world.
That's a good point. Um, that was at least slightly more understandable, and you could see how someone could rationalize it to themselves and clip it that way. This is literally the exact opposite, because he did say very nice people and he was referring to a group of people that were there. It just wasn't the neo-Nazi morons who came up to march. It was the counter protesters over the statue removal. Totally different thing. This is literally the exact opposite, because what Roseanne was doing was textbook definitional irony, which we don't understand what it means anymore because of a darn Alanis Morissette song. Saying the literal opposite of what you
I know
mean.
she got it wrong, but I still love that song.
I know it's catchy.
Yeah.
Um, that whole album's pretty good, actually. Anyway,
Yeah.
she was being ironic, and it was abundantly clear
Well,
to
you want
anyone.
irony. She's probably the most happily married female art artist that has come out of that era. So Jagged
There's
Little
some
Pill
irony.
is the irony right there.
There you go.
As we talk about
Anyway,
Taylor Swift, after Kelsey is done, after the NFL is done making money off this whole thing, is she going to write another song or about a breakup, or is this one going to be the song that says maybe it's me? Because at some point you got to have that self-reflection. I don't know.
well, at some point you have to have self-reflection, but again, that's where what Harris has said was so disappointing, because at some point you expect some self-reflection of, oh, actually Trump, we're about to get into, that was something I thought about talking about. I genuinely think we are on the cusp of World War III. It's not going to be what people think it is, because it's different every time, but
It's going to be more of a slog this time.
we're on the cusp of World War III. So at some point, don't people like Harris have to say, we thought Trump was this monster and lunatic who was going to get us into World War III. And now here we are on the actual verge of World War III. Maybe I was wrong.
Well, except the Harrises and the Bill Maher's of the world are smart enough to do the mental gymnastics to try to find a way to say this was all his fault still. Things he did during this time set it up. Or the discord within our nature. This is actually part of their argument. We go back to 2011, 2013, when the media started really starting to divide the country, because they were allowed to propagandize us with the government. Smith-Muntz Act. I think that's right.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's something Muntz or Mance or something. But we go back there and talk about the division. BLM was formed way before Trump was a thing, right?
Yeah.
But
Really,
the people on the left that want to hate Trump talk about how he divided the nation, and that's why the explosion is happening. The Summer of Love didn't happen because of Trump. The Summer of Love happened because we had this thing brewing in our nation for about a decade, and there was an egregious act that happened very publicly to light that tinder. It's basically, we've been under the media version of California's forestry policy. It is ready to go up in flames with a cigarette thrown out the window, and that's why that happened. But the people on the left that want to go la 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 la, even the ones that speak on it, like Harris, speaking on the racial tension and how BLM is bad, and again the not woke stuff, that was already there, but they want to blame Trump. So this stuff is happening because of current policies, but they still want to blame things that happened during his time, because they're going to go back to the, if we were united here, that wouldn't be happening there. And that's true. But who started the division? That's what's in question. If America was strong, Putin doesn't do shit. If America was strong, Iran would still be going, yeah, no. Hamas, why don't you just kill a couple people at a time for a little bit longer, you know?
Yeah,
That's what would
let's
be
not
going
start
on.
World War III just yet.
Yeah, but we elect a weak leader. We pull out
He's
of
more than just
Afghanistan
weak.
weakly.
I don't remember who I heard say this, but he's more than just weak, and this is the problem with his obvious physical and mental failings. He's
No,
feeble.
no, it's not that. I say he's weak because he's corrupt.
No, he's feeble. He doesn't just project weakness to the world. It's America isn't just weak, it's feeble. And so
Corrupt
it's a
people are
couple
weak-minded.
steps over that.
Corrupt people are weak-minded because they have very little filter on impulse control.
Mm.
And he sees a little bit of green for his family, and where he gets the 10% cut as the supposed big guy, which I don't know who else the fucking big guy would be. That's the thing. If you're gonna say he's not the big guy, well, find the big guy and bring him to
Yeah,
me.
did
Yeah.
you listen to Peterson's interview with Divine, Miranda Devine, the Laptop from Hell author? Is that
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
Oof.
There's something seriously wrong with this guy. And that is something actually I was a little disappointed in because Peterson being Peterson, I was kind of wanting him to dive deeper into that and say, man, what is wrong with this guy
He's
going all the way back to when he was first elected to the Senate?
but he has his hard lines, but he is still playing the YouTube game.
Mm,
Yeah, he's not monetized on YouTube, but you notice he's got the ads throughout and everything, and that's dependent on him being there, period. So those advertisers are expecting him to have his 2 million views or
yeah.
whatever, or else they wouldn't be paying him what they're paying him.
Um, we kind of get off. Well, we didn't get off topic
No,
because
no,
that was
no,
the whole
no.
point is to riff on the
Yeah,
broader idea.
yeah, but
But
let's go back to it for a minute because I want to say why he was supporting the case for the demonization of Harris. I
mm,
don't want to demonize anybody as a person. I think everybody's redeemable, you
mhm.
know. And I think part of the heels in the ground is because of the reaction. I think if that would have been a more intellectual reaction, it would have been a little bit better. Which I'm gonna segue us to an interview that he was just on with Eric Weinstein. Okay, so the more Kissin started talking about the Mulvaney situation, he laid out a progression to why everybody was so upset and why it was justified. Because it was Gillette. Men are horrible, buy our
Mm.
stuff. It was, what was the other one he brought up before Bud? There was another one. It was like, men, y'all are horrible, still buy our product. And then
Mhm.
finally Bud comes out and says, men, y'all are horrible. And this is the comments of the person in charge of the marketing as well as the whole Mulvaney situation. And it's, men, y'all are horrible, but still buy our product. And so it was that keep piling on of basically shitting on your customer. And so now let's look at Harris. It was Time Magazine. Y'all are stupid. We need the right president. It was social media, Zuckerberg. I'm not going to give him a pass, even though all these intellectuals want to. The guy that was ahead of Twitter, uh,
Jack Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey. It was every mainstream media outlet. It was Rachel Maddow. It was even Bill Maher, who's kind of coming around a little bit, but still has this blind spot.
Mhm.
He's doing a little better than Harris because he doesn't talk about dead babies in the basement, but you could still see this blind spot every time he talks to somebody. It was all of these things, and then the guy said it out loud. So Bud Light is the one that said it out loud. Harris was the one that said it out loud. So yes, it was a culmination of all of these things coming forward.
And it was something else about the Bud Light specifically is um it, it wasn't just that, those interview clips that came out of the marketing lady, basically crapping on the customers and saying they're, frat boy morons and we want to change that image.
Miller Lite, that was the other one.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
Miller
forgotten
Lite
about that one.
with their feminist commercial. Women made beer before men, so y'all should bow to us.
Yes.
Uh,
That the Miller Lite one is a great contrast because that was obnoxious and it was annoying, But the Bud Light one goes into more of what I was talking about was, is it right or is it wrong? We're not just canceling you because of one thing you did. You are assaulting truth itself. So the contrast with the Miller one. So the Miller one was, women are awesome, men suck, stop oogling babes in bikinis and buy our beer. Hiring Dylan Mulvaney to be a spokesperson to help advertise your beer is an assault on truth itself because of what Mulvaney represents. That's why the trans issue is such a lightning rod for so many people. It's not just that it is lumped into an attack on kids, which is a way to get people emotional real fast, but the whole trans issue itself is an assault on truth. No,
There were so many
the
layers to the assault that it was the final straw. It was something that everybody could get pissed off about.
and because it was so egregious, because it wasn't, so the Miller one, as obnoxious as it wasn't that new. It
Well,
was like the Gillette one or any other ad you could name.
and the Miller one is okay. So this friend that has impulse control when it comes to other men also has impulse control when it comes to arguing with exes. Uh, and this is where Miller Lite was. They were the argument of, this is the good thing we did, this is the good thing we did, this is the good thing we did, and then they had to add the little fuck you at the end.
The
And it was like,
first,
no,
like,
leave it at the first
yes,
message.
the,
You can bring women in without pissing on men. And it was good at that for the first like 30 seconds, and then it was like, and y'all are dumb. And I'm
the
like,
first
don't
30
send the
seconds,
last part.
I
Don't.
thought it was a troll. The first 30 seconds, I thought it was a troll because they're saying, oh, how bad it was, the barbaric 80s and 90s when we're using bikini clad women to sell our beer, but you're showing all the bikini clad women. So I'm like, is this a troll? Is like, is her top gonna come off sometime during this ad? What's happening here? But then they swerve into the, you liked that, didn't you? You filthy, filthy boy. Stop looking at those women.
No, I will not, by the way. No, I
No,
will
I
not.
will not.
Yes.
Uh, but to me,
Oh
that
man, see, I used the wrong meme at the wrong time. I might have to reuse one for this one. Remember the meme I made that had the Lubriderm bottle and it said self-care?
ow.
Oh. Oh.
Uh, did you watch Star Trek: The Next Generation?
I was a halfway fan of that. Where I would watch it for a little bit of entertainment, but I wasn't as into it as a lot of the real Star Trek fan people were.
There's a
I'm
great
I'm an
episode.
original Star Trek person, but I liked the cheesiness of it, and that's what
Yes,
people hated about it. I loved the cheesiness of the
the
original.
cheesy of the original series
Yeah.
versus the contemplative philosophy of Next Generation.
Hmm.
Um, so there's a great episode that is a lot of people's favorites. It's a two-parter where Captain Picard gets captured by the Cardassians and he's tortured. Um, and one of the ways of
Captured by
breaking
the
him,
Cardassians.
Card, yes,
I think Kanye West was in that episode too, wasn't he?
it was that horrible. Anyway,
Or Reggie Bush. Who was the one with the
yes, Reggie
video?
Bush was the
Yeah,
bad guy.
yeah.
Um, Actually, great character actor. I can't remember his name who played the torturer. Um, but it's straight out of 1984, and and because in order to break him, so what obviously what they want is military intelligence. You don't just go straight to that. You have to break the person, and the way the captor does it is he shines these bright lights in Picard's face and says, "How many lights are there?" There are four lights. Hit him with some pain. No, there aren't. There are five. No, there are four lights. There are five. So that's the through line for that episode is this torturer trying to get Picard to break and say when he knows there are four lights. No, you're right. There are five.
But
The
it's
more
1984. That is exactly what happens in 1984.
exactly why, because there's a quote that's attributed to Voltaire, and I don't know if it actually was him or not. Of people who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
So
which is where I think Harris is. He knows somewhere deep down, if he would get to the right state of meditation or take an ice bath or something at some point, that he was part of the problem for a while, and he doesn't want to admit that.
Mhm.
He did something he knows was untrue. He wrote the book called Lying. And when you write the book called Lying and then you lie for a purpose, you kind of are in a spot.
Mhm.
And, a normal functioning human being, I say that it's not the default. A very high functioning human being would be able to say, you know what? I I didn't follow my own advice for once. And look at what happened. And he's not at that point right now. And his friends are not on the point to be able to hammer down on him about it right now, except for Eric Weinstein. But it's and Brett, which he won't even talk to right now. And so that's the point he's in, and we've all been there on stupider, smaller stuff than this.
Mhm.
So this is where I do give him a little bit of a pass, not a pass, but a matter of understanding where he's coming from.
But then, that's how you understand where
But the
the other
stakes are so
side is.
high that we
Yeah,
can't
exactly. But
just let
that's
it
where
lie. Yeah.
you understand where the other side is coming from of gaslighting, which at one point was a niche play and movie from the 50s. It is now in our vernacular. It is now in common usage because it is happening so much. And it's so much more egregious than the root of where the term comes from, because we actually have video evidence. So you're going to tell me, that that's a girl and she's brave and beautiful, and I can see the bulge in his swimsuit.
Tim Pool makes a great point about Dylan Mulvaney. He thinks she's a troll from the beginning. He thinks that this whole thing is this psychopath enjoying the attention, but also like making fun of everybody at the same time. And I don't think he's completely wrong,
I wonder if
because
it started that way and then it morphed
became an
into
identity. Well,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, we all take on different roles. This is actually something from my test tonight in developmental psych, social role theory, which has its good points and has its stupid stuff. But yeah, she created a social role for herself, himself, however she's identifying today, because I think she's actually non-binary now. So
I don't
they
even know what that
self,
means, but okay.
they self. See, they just wanted to introduce ebonics. That's what it is. She's all about they self. You know, it's yeah, the
Oh, the
person's
pain.
the
The
person's
pain.
self-help, right? So no, it's I want to get onto a story that just popped up on my Twitter right now, and at some point, but let's go ahead and segue into this. We have Harris putting his foot in his mouth. We have someone kind of defending him, even though I think they personally implicated him even more in the defense. And then on Triggernometry this last week, they had both Eric Weinstein and Sam Harris on at the same time. And it was a kind of a back and forth on what's going on in the Middle East. And this is where Sam Harris is his strongest. And that's why it's so egregious what he said,
Mhm.
because he's at his strongest when he talks about how ideology captures people.
Mhm.
And that's what makes the Dead Babies interview so bad, because it was an obvious example of him being ideologically captured. It doesn't have to be religion. And so it was an interesting talk, but Eric overcomplicated everything like mathematicians do. But Sam was actually very, very, very cogent in this interview. So it was if you wanted to move on to the Middle East, then yeah, it's a good watch for anybody who wants to, where you can see Sam at his best. Not this Sam. I'm always at my best.
Well, the what's going on in the Middle East is a good, additional point, additional illustration of the broader picture of what we've been talking about here. Have you heard the story about the Baptist hospital that was bombed and 500 people died?
Yeah, and The number one fact checker who just got an award for it was the first person to report the false story, by the way. So it's he's a New York Times guy. But yeah, this is our whole point. This is why we haven't even talked about it till now, because breathe for a second.
Mhm.
We're getting information from a war zone. You know it's going to be freaking cloudy for a bit. I mean, you can analogize it with itself. When a bomb hits, there's dust everywhere.
Mhm.
You got to figure out what is what before you can even go on. You got to figure out which way's up before you can go on. And it's, to me, this whole situation is, I did post this on Twitter, and I actually got no trolls when I posted this. I said, this is actually why I'm kind of glad I have no religious ideology, because that's the root of this. And it takes on many forms, but in this case, it is.
Well, and specific for anyone who hasn't heard, there was this story, and you brought up the New York Times. The New York Times had something like 4 inflammatory headlines before they acknowledged, oh, oops. And if you had any self-awareness, you would know that, hey, we're citing Hamas sources and taking them at their word. Maybe we should fact check this ourselves before we publish. And
Yeah,
so
and the same thing with citing Israeli sources. It's there's a reason I think both sides of this fight are very against independent journalists being in Gaza right now. Hamas is keeping them out, and Israeli government is keeping them out because they want it to be as easily propagandized as possible, both sides.
the Israel issue, the Israel Palestine issue, is to me a great illustration of how things can be both incredibly simple and incredibly complicated at the same time. Because the okay, so the hospital. Let's stay on the hospital issue as a direct example. Hamas, in its charter, declares that it wants to exterminate all Jews, and yet it is treated as a normal state actor of, say there's always protests going on in France. And so when the French government issues a statement, it's repeated with authority throughout the media. Okay. As obnoxious as the French government may or may not be, they're still a mostly legitimate Western style democratic, government. Hamas is and has always been a terrorist organization that, by its own admission, doesn't just want to free Palestine, they want to exterminate all the Jews. So maybe you should be highly skeptical of anything they say. On the other hand, Israel is, even if you're very sympathetic to Israel, you have to understand that they are surrounded by people who don't like them or actively want to kill them. They're going to spin. They have to, at least in their own minds, they have to survive. It's not just a matter of, politics as usual. It's literally life and death from their point of view. They have to spin. So when Israel says something, yeah, okay. But here's where it's simple, but it's complicated, is when Israel issues a statement, you can be more or less confident that the gist is true. But because to me, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys is pretty black and white. But this is where it gets complicated, is okay, but Israel's still going to spin because they have to or feel they have to. So let's be discerning, there, and think things through. But when you're parroting a comment from Hamas that Israel purposefully, the first reports were purposefully bombed a hospital that was run by a Baptist NGO and killed 500 people, maybe you shouldn't publish that headline until you've looked into it. Because very quickly it turned out, oh, look, we can look at pictures and the building's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And Rashida Tlaib, one of the most obnoxious, outright anti-Semitic members of Congress, is still using the hospital as a talking point.
Which is funny because she's still using the hospital as a talking point after she issued a correction on her original statements. So that shows you how deeply people look into stuff. But
when she's trying to animate a crowd, she still uses it as a talking point.
Well, just like Biden used very fine people, which at that point we could it could have been easily fact checked. By the way, fact checker who got the award, who also reported in the hospital, you could have easily fact checked that statement during that debate, but you didn't. New York Times.
Speaking of double standards, one of the times she's more recently used that hospital as a talking point was in a pro-Hamas, I'm sorry, pro-Palestine rally at the Capitol, and then a bunch of people at that rally stormed the Capitol. I am reliably informed that's an insurrection. But according to undercover video of people who were talking to the people who were arrested, they had $50 of bail and were let out. There are people from January 6th who weren't even in the building who are in jail.
Don't make me get my lead hat out on that one, because there are very public figures who are part of the photo ops that would some of them even spent more time than we say they should have, but I'm starting to wonder if they're very well taken care of right now. Podium guy is one of them.
QAnon shaman.
QAnon shaman is another one. The other guy with the big Q shirt on that apparently went home and told his family that it was all it was all staged, and then he disappeared for a while, but now he's apparently back home and not saying anything. But then there's people like Torios, who were public enemy number one, who wasn't even there, who got 20 years in jail because he's one of the leaders of, what was it, Patriot Front, or
I can't remember if he was a Proud Boys
Proud
or
Boy. Proud Boy. Yeah, I knew it was P. Yeah, Patriot Front is the one that they did the fake thing in Virginia. But no, I think they were fall guys. I think they were like, you're going to spend, a year and a half in jail, but guess what? You're not going to have to worry about another thing for the rest of your life. And I hate to have that thought, but you see these people that were threats going down really hard, even though they did nothing. And you see these people who did apparently a lot because they're on film and on video and pictures taken of them. Again, Podium guy being one of them, iconic pictures. And they basically got, it was more than we thought they should, but it was still relatively a slap on the hand versus what other people got. So this is the lead hat part of me, because I'm not tinfoil. It enhances the signal. I think they were there to boost the signal so they can get the other people, and people don't look too deeply because, oh well, yeah, this was a horrible thing and we got all these pictures. But you fail to realize that the people who are in the pictures are the ones who didn't get punished very bad. No, but let's get back to the Middle East. And this is one where I struggle with, because I like to liken this to kind of, everyday life. I think societies are the extension of individuals, right? And one of the things we've talked about ad nauseum in schools is that they switched from the everybody who was in the fight gets punished versus the person who started the fight gets punished, right? And one of the things that is part of that is an even fight should be let go, but an uneven fight should be stopped by your peers. And what we have in Israel is kind of an even fight. They're an ally, yes, but it's kind of an even fight. And realistically, the person who has the upper hand is the one that is our ally. So the problem with globalism is realistically, we should say we should just let it play out and be there in case something uneven happens. But because we're not doing that, we are actually forcing the hand of the uneven because the bigger players on the other side are doing the exact same thing. And that being Iran and realistically Russia and China. People forget about Brazil, all of these other players that are going to. If it was Israel versus Hamas, we should just let it go and see what happens. And I know that sounds psychopathic of me because lots of people are dying. But I can have that thought. Two things can be true at once. I can have that thought and mourn for everybody who's hurt in the process, but also know that if it gets bigger than that, many, 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 many times over, more people will be hurt, including the people
Pause
you.
for a second because I need to find a poll.
Okay, cool. I need a bathroom break anyways.
All right. I wanted to pull up a poll here that I'd heard about, and I'm not a stats guy, so it's one of those things that maybe you can dig into if you want to mess around with it. But so getting back to the idea of all right, we don't want to just talk about the thing, but there's a bigger picture here, kind of like what I praised about Williamson and Kissin. They really only talked about the Sam Harris incident for 5 or 6 minutes, but then they talked about the bigger picture, right? So this is really disconcerting, but not surprising if you've been following along with American politics. All right, so this is from Signal, which is a polling group, and they did polling of people in America following the October 7th attacks. And the really disconcerting one is down here with Hamas was justified in attacking Israel as part of their struggle for a Palestinian state.
Can you blow that up a little bit? Zoom in a little bit.
But joink, boink, boink.
There we go. That's better.
All right. I
And so towards the right is agree. Okay.
So 28.2% strongly agree, 29.3% somewhat agree. So a majority of Muslims. Now they say Muslim Americans, but I don't think that's right. And here's where I'm going to get into the bigger picture is let's start here. So you weren't super politically dorky like me, but were you paying attention to the 9/11 Commission and what their report was, what their finding was?
Back
So
then or now?
back then, of what the 9/11, the Blue Ribbon Commission, what their basically their ultimate finding was.
I paid attention enough to have been pulled in by some of the bullshit, but also, there was a sense of patriotism there. So I think that influenced everybody, and I was caught up in it. Yeah.
So this is really important, and it goes to something I think I said just last week was the gripe, especially of the more libertarian leaning folks like Milton Friedman, the late great Walter Williams, is that the point of government is to fix problems it created. Even the 9/11 Commission, which was a very political piece of theater, their basic conclusion was not the Fahrenheit 9/11, it was an inside job crazies, but the government dropped the ball. Not that the government did it, but the government dropped the ball. That legitimate and illegitimate, bureaucratic hurdles stopped the intelligence agencies from coordinating and cooperating. And so, yes, you had all these little bits of information here and there, but they were all scattered around, and it only made sense in hindsight. So I've mentioned before that my master's thesis involved the internment of Japanese, and part of that was looking at the pre Pearl Harbor intelligence. And there's multiple volumes of what's called magic, which was the U.S. uh, had broken the diplomatic codes of the Japanese government. In hindsight, after the fact, there are a bunch of messages that you go, ooh, that's a warning signal. But at the time, it didn't make sense. Well, same thing here. You had all these things that if someone had been able to put it all together, they might have figured out what was going on. So our response to the government dropping the ball because of bureaucratic insanity was to create more bureaucracy and create the Homeland Security Department. Our response to people who very carefully looked at what the rules and regulations were for bringing things onto a plane and then used those loopholes was to subject grandma to a strip search. It was kabuki theater. One
Yeah,
of the
which
things,
apparently I have something in my hip that I have no idea what it is, but it sets off that sensor every time, and I have to get my balls felt every time.
if anytime I'm late and I have to rush and I'm sweaty when I get there, they always think there's something hidden in my waistband. I'm like, no, I'm just sweaty. Okay, I had to run from the parking lot and it's Texas, so it's hot. Anyway,
Well, I've had a few femoral lines, so I'm actually thinking they might have accidentally left a stent in there or something. So,
that'd be
but
awkward.
but every time you do this, and it always goes off right there in my right hip.
Anyway, so the reason I pointed out that I don't know that Muslim American is actually accurate, but Muslims in the United States may be more accurate is because so there's a number I've heard recently that since 9/11, 2.3 million immigrants have been let in from predominantly Muslim countries. Why is that a problem? Because something that the the 9/11 Commission talked about themselves, and that there were red flags scattered across different agencies. Something that the right has been talking about a lot and hasn't gotten a lot of traction is it's important to remember all of the hijackers were here legally. The the great failing of 9/11 that's not talked about is it was an immigration problem. So now we have been letting in people from countries that think Hamas is fully justified, from places where looking at like Rasmussen and other polling of international polling think that you know the majority of Muslim majority countries, according to international polling, think that it is acceptable to have the death penalty for apostasy. Apostasy being leaving the faith.
So, one of the great things about me going back to school is you get textbook definitions for these things, and luckily I've been studying, so I knew exactly where to turn. Social role theory would call this role conflict. Refers to ways that demands and expectations of various roles conflict with each other. So you said Muslim American. Those are two different roles. Muslim is a religion. Islam is a religion. Muslim is identifying you as part of the Islamic religion. And American is your identity with the place you live, right? So if I say that's what African American was one thing we had for a while. It was an American of African descent. We used to say Irish American, we used to say Italian American. Some people still do, but you combine a religion with the place you live, you actually have conflicting roles, right? So we have social role spillover occurs when the demands or preoccupations about one's role interfere with the ability to carry out another role. The challenge posted by role conflict or role overload may foster a reevaluation of personal goals. So now down to the individual, you're having to pick a side, but you have two different roles. And which one is more important to you? Is American more important to you, or is Islam more important to you? Now, that's a little bit of a simplification, because what we have to also parse out from that is, are Hamas's actions viable under the statutes of Islam, right? And I think that percentage there would be the people who say yes to that question. So if we actually break that question down to what it is in somebody's head, it's, were these justifiable under the statutes of Islam, versus was this a justifiable conflict against a certain country. So that's why I go back to my ideology example of why I'm actually glad that I'm not part of some of these ideologies, is because convince me of something ridiculous and I will commit atrocious acts. Well, convince me of something that involves the life, the universe, and everything, and what atrocious acts are you going to do? It's not a light that's a different number of lights. It's, what do you believe about everything? And that's why I don't like Muslim American, because you're conflating two different things there. You can be an American and disagree with your president, but you can't be a part of the Islamic religion and disagree with Allah.
There's a reason it took a very long time before a Catholic was elected president, because there was a lot of concern amongst the majority Protestant population that is your is your allegiance going to be more towards the U.S. or the Pope? And there was some degree of prejudice in that, but there was also legitimate concern when you look at, I don't know, the history of the Middle Ages, or even past the Middle Ages, when you look at the influence of the Pope on European politics, even into the Enlightenment era, and how the Pope influenced, France and Spain especially, and the impact that had on politics. Uh, that there was a legitimate concern of, well, if the Pope says one thing but the Constitution says another thing, what are you going to do? And it was a legitimate concern, that John F. Kennedy had to overcome, and he had to speak on it. And he was asked questions about it.
We actually have data on this,
but
this is the change over time of what we would find acceptable in somebody we elected. And
oh dear.
Yeah, but it's telling, because you can also add Catholic, you can also add Baptist or whatever to this list. The reason I think I had it on here was because of that socialist little blup, which is, we still don't want that as a majority of the country. But yeah, it's over time. But you do have to question what influences people's decision making, right? And if, say, you're someone in my kind of situation where you're a little bit left, you know the implications of the abortion battle, but you have a Catholic running for president, right? Well, someone like RFK addresses that by saying, I personally believe this, but as a nation, we have to make a decision together. You
Mhm.
know, that's a little bit better answer than, I don't know, Mike Pence saying, I just believe this without adding the second part.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and you can contrast that with someone who's more politically pro-life, who says, who can articulate, I believe this because, and so I think this is the right thing to do because, just because it's a religious argument doesn't mean it's ipso facto wrong. Religion is just a moral philosophy. The same as what your moral philosophy would be if you were running for office and said, well, this is what I believe to be morally the right thing to do. So how does that apply to policy? You would have to explain that, so,
what are you
and
talking
that's
about?
why
I have no morals. You know that.
exactly. But that's why I would vote for RFK Jr. over Pence, even though Pence is supposed to be on my side. But he's a crap person and a crap candidate who can't differentiate, who can't articulate, no, this is what I believe and this is why, and so this is what I propose to do. I would vote for RFK Jr. over a bunch of people who are on my side because I actually believe what he says. So I know what I'm getting versus these other people, the Pences, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott. I know what you're saying, but I don't know what you're actually going to do because I don't believe you.
Oh, they're saying their quiet part out loud too. Kill everybody. I mean, was it Lindsey Graham that said this is a holy war? We have that.
I don't know about that, but Mitch McConnell is saying the quiet part out loud lately, where he says that I don't understand what the big deal is. Most of the money that we allocate for Ukraine is going to American companies because they're the ones who build the materials. They're the ones who build the weapon systems. And we get to kill lots of, military who's one of our greatest adversaries. So I don't see what the problem is. He's saying the quiet part out loud. He's saying the thing that the left used to accuse, Republicans of being, profiteering warmongers. And he's basically just saying, yeah, what's your problem with that? Well, there are lots of problems with that, Mitch,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Glitch, as I've heard people calling him lately.
Oh gosh. Yeah. And this is a tough one because just like with Feinstein, it's like how much of this is them being kept alive to be part of
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, but so circling back to where we started here with the big picture and Sam Harris, if you are if you are pulled along by emotion and that emotion is fear and resentment, then you can justify all sorts of things. So that was, what was the number there? Adding up, somewhat agree and strongly agree. That was almost 60%. Almost 60% of Muslims in America believed Hamas's actions were justified. Let's remember what those actions were because they're pretty damn horrific.
Yeah. Lindsey Graham, we're in a religious war and I unapologetically stand with Israel.
This is why I hate that he's on my side because he's right, but he's wrong and he's an idiot.
Yeah. Yes, he's right that there is a religious war going on. The question is, should the United States as a country be part of
The
taking a
question is,
side in a religious war, especially since we have people called Muslim Americans here
can
as part
the
of our
question
citizenry?
the question is, can you articulate that without sounding like you're calling for another crusade? Which, granted, Crusader is an awesome album by an underrated metal band, Saxon, but I don't think we want that as policy for the American government. And that is where, that almost 60% of American Muslims can say, yes, Hamas is justified. Why? Because you're adding in a religious component here. This is a strongly, deeply held ideological component. And so if you're bought into that and you're not thinking it through, then you can say, yeah, it's okay that they butchered 1,400 mostly civilians in horrific ways and took hundreds of them hostage.
Yeah, and I hate the headlines that they're trying to like beheaded babies. I'm like, the other ones were burned and tortured. It's actually better to be beheaded. Quit using this beheaded babies thing. The fact that
Well,
they killed babies is enough.
there's something about dismemberment that is a psychological thing that I think I've mentioned this before. There are numerous, psychological warfare studies that show
Yeah, that's why the
soldiers
guillotine worked, right? Yeah,
soldiers fear being maimed
because
or
there's no coming back from
dismembered
it.
more than death. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no coming back from a beheading. And like, say if you're shot, you still have a chance. Everybody
Well,
just
but
wants a chance.
there's also something about having your body whole that's a psychological comfort versus being dismembered. There's a
Oh,
strong psychological problem there.
I have in my will cut me apart. I want to be a cadaver when
I've
when
I've
I'm dead.
I've had a toe hanging off by a thread that had to be sewed back on, and it still gives me the heebie-jeebies every once in a while, just because there's something weird about watching a body part just flopping there.
Yeah, but you also look at people who have lost a body part and they're actually quite humorous about it. It's part of the coping strategy. Like I had
Yeah.
my former father-in-law, it's my first wife. He was missing a finger, and he would always be like, "And it's right over there." And he would do it just to poke fun of the fact that he's missing the finger that would normally point.
You've derailed my brain. Um. Oh, right. So the a lot of the same people who were outraged at Russia for invading Ukraine because, oh my gosh, you don't just invade another country to take its territory. We settled this after World War II. We're a civilized people. We don't do this anymore. And Putin's going back to, World War II geopolitics of I'm just going to invade my neighbor and take their stuff because I want it and I need it. What Hamas did goes back way more than World War II. We're talking medieval barbaric evil. Okay. But if you're far gone enough, you can justify it in your own mind. There's very little that cannot be justified. I don't remember who I heard make this point. I think it was the Dinesh D'Souza interview I was listening to, that the the death camps, not the concentration camps, but the dedicated death camps. Now there were concentration camps, like I've mentioned, going to Dachau before, which is outside of Munich, and later that did turn into a death camp because everything did. But the dedicated, all that happens here is we gas and we burn Jews. Those were all outside of Germany because it's easier to accept if you can ignore it.
Okay, so you brought up Ukraine, so I had to bring this into it.
Oh, here we
Also,
go.
back to Lindsey Graham. Accuse Iran of involvement with Hamas deadly surprise attack. We're here to tell you, Iran, we're watching you. If this war grows, it's coming to your backyard. So what that says is that funding troops and weapons and training troops and weapons and backing them indirectly is an act of war, as we tell Iran. What are we doing?
Oh boy.
Funding Ukrainian troops, sending our own F-16s and tanks and everything that are, oh, they're not the ones we're using currently, so we can go ahead and send it, and it's not an act of war, and training their troops, which the CIA actually was just caught on having records of training the people who blew up Nord Stream, which were Ukrainian,
Uh-oh.
but they were trained by us and supplied by us. But so there is that. So if Iran doing it is an act of war, then why is it not an act of war if we're doing it? And why is that not a
Uh,
legitimate question to
it's
ask?
it's it's worse than that.
I know it's
All
worse
right.
than that, but I'm trying to keep us on YouTube.
So if you want a good political breakdown of what's going on in Israel, and what has been going on the last few years. Daniel Horowitz, who has friends and family who live in Israel, and he's an Orthodox Jew. He did an
With a
hour.
name like Horowitz, no.
Yeah. He did an hour with Jason Whitlock, I think it was last week, and they had a really good conversation because Whitlock is, again, he's one of those, honest seekers. So he admits, I don't know a lot about this issue, explain to me, but then he'll ask probing questions of, okay, hold on, well, wait a minute, what about this? So Horowitz has been talking about something that I had forgotten about, that we are funding we are sending massive amounts of material and support to Lebanon, which is Hezbollah. All right. So Hamas is Hamas is a true guerrilla organization. So, uh, for instance, one of the things that Hamas complains about is, oh, we don't have water because Israel cuts it off. No, Israel and the world community gives you tons of humanitarian support, which includes infrastructure. You dig up the pipes to use them as makeshift rockets. Hezbollah has real arms and armor. This is one of the things that's complicating Israel doing a full-scale ground invasion into either Gaza or the West Bank. Is Hezbollah has said, if you do that, we will attack. And Hezbollah not only
Yeah,
has
and
modern weaponry, they have our weaponry.
aren't they like one of the top militaries in the world? As even not a country, they are an organization, but they're one of the top militaries in the world.
They have a lot of people under arms, and they are engaged in combat quite often because you've got, Israel on their southern border. You've also got Jordan and Syria that they don't always get along with. So they have a lot of practical experience as well as the training. But so as he points out, um, foreign policy is no different from domestic policy in that most programs our government wants to fund address problems that our previous policies caused, hence the cycle of government. When it comes to foreign aid, how about we first stop funding the problem before throwing endless funding at a solution while continuing to fund the problem? This is something that I first heard, I think, from Penn Jillette, and it may have been on bullshit, uh, where they were talking about government spending and pointed out, we fund millions of dollars in anti-smoking campaigns. We also subsidize tobacco farmers in the tune of millions of dollars. Can we at least just pick one? Nowhere is this cycle of insanity more evident than with Joe Biden's massive Israel aid package, primarily consisting of Ukraine grift, while he handcuffs the Jewish state's self-defense efforts and continues to fund its enemies, including the Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. So while Lindsey Graham is out there waggling his finger at Iran because they fund and train Hamas, they're completely ignoring the fact that Israel also funds and trains Hezbollah, who we are indirectly helping by helping Lebanon. And so he goes on in the article to itemize and lay out how our assistance in
You meant
Lebanon.
Iran funds and trains Hezbollah.
Yes, Iran funds.
You said Israel.
No. We do.
Yeah, but we do. But you said Israel funds and trains them.
Oh no. Yeah. Sorry. So
I just wanted to correct that misspeak before somebody clips you or something.
We are funding and training Lebanon, which is, it's not outright controlled like Hamas was literally elected and is literally the government of Gaza, but Hezbollah is basically that degree of power in Lebanon. And it was because of our assistance that Hezbollah was able to find and break up Israel intelligence cells. It's one of the reasons this attack was able to happen and Israel was caught off guard, is thanks to us helping Hezbollah in Lebanon dismantle a very significant chunk of Israel's intelligence apparatus. So far as I know, and not so far as I know, yes, the Lebanon Hezbollah funding is still going on, but even out in the open, we're saying we support Israel, but now we're going to give all of this money to Palestine and Gaza, which is Hamas. They are the elected government of Gaza. So we're funding them at the same time we're denouncing them and saying we're going to help Israel. Can we pick just one at a minimum? You know, there's good arguments to say, why do we fund either? But at the most, could we just fund one? This hurts my brain.
I was looking for a specific meme, but I couldn't find it in time. But it was, one of the big talking points is the number of Hezbollah and Hamas people that have come across the border here in the United States recently. But it was a meme of, yeah, in Texas, this is what's going to happen. And it was a bunch of rednecks with guns. And realistically, yeah, you're welcome.
No, that's all right. So
thank you, Second Amendment.
I'm trying to
I don't
remember
have a
who I
gun,
heard.
but I'm actually a pretty damn good shot with that bow and arrow.
And you probably have lots of neighbors that have guns.
oh yeah, all my
But
neighbors, every single one of them.
there was a disturbing pro-Palestine rally here in Dallas, but I highly doubt anything would happen here because it's Texas and so many people are strapped. But I did hear someone, and I'm trying to. This may have been Dan Bongino because he has a lot of contacts in with former and current intelligence people, who said, "I just heard from someone," and he didn't say who it was, but he said that this is what they told me. That, paraphrasing, I was just briefed by someone connected to Mossad and a Marine spec ops guy who said there are plans, there are credible threats against the US from Hamas and Hezbollah, that they are already in the country. And so, yes, you have the SEALs over here in the south, and it's all gangs up here. But this is what I was getting to, and
but I like Alaska. Even the liberals have guns.
Yes. The
Impossible corn maze.
Yes. So they're not going there. They're not going to the backcountry hunter. They're not going to the Mormons. The specific places that were listed as potential targets for, and they specifically said an attack like what Hamas did on October 7th in Israel, a similar style urban combat assault. And they talked about the Bay Area and Los Angeles were mostly the specific targets they named. And I don't think it's an accident that it's large urban areas in California, not in the middle of the country where everyone's strapped.
Yeah, you go to Fourth Ward here in Houston, yeah, you're in trouble.
Yep.
Or Fifth Ward, or any of the wards here in Houston.
There are a number of synagogues around me, and I'm quite certain that if someone went after them, that the neighboring Baptist church would pour out and grab the guns from their gun rack.
Well, and that's the thing, is your poll was a little bit disturbing, but when it really comes down to it, in the United States of America, and this is again, I've made the case for a little bit of nationalism before. The American comes first, which is actually kind of it's an amazing event, because how can religion not come first? But in the United States, the America comes first. I would help my Muslim brother and my Christian brother, even though I'm an atheist. And you would do the same, even though I'm an atheist and your Muslim brother was down.
And that's because here it is, or at least was, who knows if it will be, that is because there was a recognition that the
humans are humans.
Well, not just that. The uniqueness of America allows you to be the best Christian or Jew or Muslim or even atheist that you want to be, as opposed to the rest of the world where you might be funneled into a narrow lane or packed into a corner or just, thrown out of society, as has happened and still happens elsewhere. That here you can be who you truly want and maybe were meant to be. I mean, that's the poem on the Statue of Liberty. It's not saying, yes, give us all of the refuse, we will be the refugee sanctum of the world. That's not what it's saying. It's saying you think these people are low, but they can come here and they can be amazing because we are going to let them flourish. And we've lost that tie that once bound us, that it doesn't matter how you vote or if you vote. It doesn't matter what day you go to church or if you go to church. That we are all bound by what was laid out in the Declaration of Independence, the idea of inalienable rights. We have these rights simply for being human beings. They were not given to us by any government, and no government can take them away. And we will stand with each other to ensure that that happens.
And it's the old your right to swing your fist ends when it hits my face, right? So your right to believe what you believe religiously is 100% acceptable in the United States system if we do it right. But if you, as your fundamentalist belief, wants to hurt somebody else who has another fundamentalist belief, which is what we have going on over there now, well, then you don't have the right to do that. So there is a distinction there. It's not just everything's free flowing. You know, we all want to sing Kumbaya by the campfire and everybody get along, but it's that also threat of your beliefs are 100% valid, but you can't hurt somebody else because of them. And so it's a yin yang with that. And without that balance, it doesn't work. Because if it's all about accepting everything, the bad actor is going to come in and blow everything up. Which might bring us to sex work. I don't know. I don't know. I could segue this. You know, the reason why Hamas exists is because of angry young men who aren't having sex, but that's how the Taliban was formed. So, okay, so for those that don't know, in Afghanistan, there's a huge skew of male to female ratio. And basically you need resources as a male to get to be able to acquire a female. Sorry, all you feminists out there, that's the truth. Even women that are successful still look for men that are successful. And so what happens when you have that huge skew is the firstborn boy gets the preference and he can marry, and all the other boys after that have to support the firstborn boy, because that they need to make sure he has all the resources possible to secure a proper bride. Well, what the Taliban did was they came in and they talked to all these young men that were supporting their older brothers and said, you know what? Let's make a deal. You be part of our army. You may die. You may die. You probably will die. But if you don't die and you help us take power, you're going to be a free person to be able to marry and have kids and all of these things that men want. That's how they built an army. The same thing with Hamas, the same thing with Hezbollah. That is how you build an army of men that do not care if they die. And I think that's something that we're not addressing in this. And so the political we just talked about for a long time, about an hour and a half, but the social is also part of this. How do we stop this? How do we spread some of our Western ideals without being colonialists, without imposing them? Because some of these other ideals are making it possible for this to exist. And it's, I mean, you look at a country, what is that? What is the province of China that has like a 5-to-1 girl to guy ratio?
I don't know, but can I go there?
Was that? Yeah, exactly. Well, because the men don't work. And basically every guy has about 4 or 5 wives that support him.
I had not heard of this. No, this must be one of the rural areas, because in the urban areas, it's flipped the other way.
It's flipped the other way, which is why we're having a children crisis. Yeah. But yeah, it's also one of the most peaceful places on earth because there are no unhappy young men. Unhappy young men are the ones that create violence. That's just the way it is. Add testosterone to depression, and you have a very volatile thing that is willing to blow himself up because he's unhappy. And there's a promise of virgins on the other side.
That actually ties into something I talked about last time, which was Jimmy Carr on Modern Wisdom. He made that point of males, boys are all on performance enhancing drugs. They're called balls, and that so
I still haven't watched that interview. Sorry.
so he made the point that he has a daughter. So something he tries to instill in her is that you are not naturally inclined to take risks, because that's something that testosterone does. That's one of the reasons. Yes, you have an overwhelming majority of successful CEOs, entrepreneurs are all men, but prisons are overwhelmingly male as well, because males are going to take risks, and sometimes those are really good and beneficial, and sometimes they're terrible. So this is where you as a girl can, you know, can use this tool. Is all right, I know I need to take risks to be able to compete with boys and men, but I have the discernment of a woman, so I should be able to pick and choose my risks better than a lot of males can.
We had alluded to this before, but
Mm.
according to the Ernst and Young survey, 90% of women sampled played sports. So if you want to be a CEO as a woman, learn to have that competitiveness that the balls give us men. Again, back to my friend that wanted to pick a fight. You know, his there were women around. He was thinking with his nuts and not his head. He was thinking with the head that doesn't make good decisions. And that's actually what it takes to succeed at a high level in a competitive environment.
Circling it back to kind of where we started and what we've been talking about here, that's where propagandists and demagogues can build a crowd. Is wave the flag and pound the war drum, and the guys are going to get all excited. And then if you also appeal to the emotion of it, well, then you're going to pull in the women on your side as well, and you're going to short circuit the critical thinking of all of them.
Yeah, and let's look at like an example like the ancient Vikings, right? What was the appeal of being one of the raiders?
Loot.
Loot. Yeah, wealth. What is the appeal of wealth for a man? To attract the women. What appeals the women? The wealthy man who's going to supply for their children, which they didn't have birth control back then. So if you are giving into your loins, you are going to have children for the most part. Mm-hmm. That's how they played into it. It was, hey, we're going to send you on this raiding mission. You're probably going to die. But if you don't die, your balls will be empty and your stomach will be full. Isn't that the old advice? Keep his balls empty and his stomach full and he'll never leave you. Right. Exactly. And that's the appeal. And it is convincing both sides and playing to the reason why that happens. We're in modern times, man. We've got birth control, and we've got a situation where it doesn't take being big and strong to make wealth. This is something we're going to have to adapt to over time.
And this is so for the first week or two after October 7th, Whitlock was catching a lot of flack because from both sides, because he was saying, hold on, can we slow down here and not make decisions based off of emotion? And, the pro-Palestine side was, how dare you? Because, and this is something he's been talking about this week, is that Black people are being pulled into this pro-Palestine thing because it's all wrapped up into one bundle of, well, if you agree with the racial narrative in America, well, Israel's a colonial power, so you have to oppose them. It's like, no, I don't buy into that. I have eyeballs. I can see what Hamas did. Hamas is obviously evil here.
Mm-hmm.
So, all in, let's throw all our support to Israel and just turn Gaza into a parking lot. Well, hold on, wait a second. No, let's
There's
think
people
this
there. There's a
through.
lot of people there.
Let's think this through and make rational decisions, you know, and then you kind of have the third, the third side here, which is everything's a psyop. This is all false flag, and they're, scrutinizing the color of the blood on a literally, I've seen that. I'm scrutinizing the blood of a picture of a decapitated baby, and you're like, okay, there's something wrong with you.
Mhm.
You also need to step back for a second. And that's one of the reasons he had Horowitz on for a full hour and just talked to him about, okay, what's going on here? Am I crazy to think that this is another, this is another Ukraine? And Horowitz, very obviously very sympathetic to Israel, pointed out, no, you're not crazy to think that, because the entire Western world, which includes Israel, has a problem with radical progressive leftists. Every country has these problems, and you saw it during COVID, where Israel had some of the most egregious lockdown policies anywhere, and a lot of that was coming from, you know, uh, Soros funded radical leftist actors who were trying to destabilize Israel. It's one of the reasons they've been caught off guard, because they've had a lot of internal struggles. So you're right to be leery of, is this another Ukraine situation? You also have the idiots like Lindsey Graham out there. What Hamas wants, they may be psychos, but they're not stupid. What they want, the reason they took hostages, is they want Israel to pull out the tanks and come marching into Gaza and the West Bank to try and rescue those prisoners. Why? Because they're not stupid. They know they cannot win in a war against Israel unless it becomes a regional conflict. And here you have Lindsey Graham trying to make it a regional conflict. Would you please shut up? And for the love of God, South Carolina, you supposedly red state, can you please elect someone else to the Senate?
Yeah, and then you've got unequal pressure where he's out there screaming for Iran to do this, Iran to not do that. Where is he on Egypt and refugees? Because part of the problem is nobody can leave Gaza right now.
Mm-hmm.
Israel could do their thing on the ground if people could leave Gaza right now,
That,
but Egypt will not let
yes,
them in.
this is one of the dirty secrets about the Palestinians. Is, first of all, that's not a real word.
Yeah, nobody wants them is the kind of the dirty secret. They're the redheaded
Mm-hmm.
stepchild of that area.
Eh,
Even the other
uh-huh.
Arab nations won't let them in. And so Israel is the one nation that let them in, but they also beat them like the redheaded stepchild. And so we've got a situation where it's this whole group of people is very desperate. And 43%, almost half, are so desperate they're going to elect this party into power that is going to do the stupid things that they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a pro Hamas argument. This is a, well, also understand that we're all making this problem worse argument. And it's hard
So
to watch. It's hard to
yeah.
watch.
So my kind of final thought on this, and this is where it makes me mad, is that again, it's simple but complex. Hamas is clearly the bad guy here. And I don't remember who I first heard say this. I know Dennis Prager has said this, that the simplicity of the Israel situation can be summed up with this idea, this thought experiment. What happens if tomorrow Hamas, Hezbollah, et al., Islamic Jihad, they all lay down their arms? They all give up all of their weapons and say, we're not fighting anymore. What happens? Just think that through of, all right, what are the possibilities there? Generally speaking, there would probably be peace in the Middle East. What happens if Israel says, you know what, you're right, we've been the bad guy all along, we are destroying all of our weapons? The second Holocaust, that's what happens, and everybody knows it.
Let's kind of parallel this to something that's a little more close to home. Almost every school shooter was ostracized, stigmatized, and bullied. Do we excuse school shootings?
That's a good point.
We don't. We say hang and shoot these guys. mostly guys.
That's the
And
simple part. The complicated is okay, but what do we do? How do we stop it? What do we do now?
yeah, what do we do
Yes, it
now?
gets
Yeah.
complicated from there, but you can still establish a black and white line of good and bad here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hamas is the school shooter of the Middle East right now. They're going in and taking out their rage, which may or may not be justified in certain ways. Just because you have a reason for rage doesn't mean you can enact extreme uh, actions based on that rage.
And
Right?
I think using your analogy, the most egregious example that still, if I, gets me choked up to this day because it's so horrific is as horrible as Columbine was, you at least understood the rationale of the perpetrators. Why? Well, because they went into their high school and shot up their classmates who they blamed for their lot in life. The Sandy Hook guy, he's angry at the world and he goes and kills a bunch of elementary schoolers who have nothing to do with why he's angry.
Mm-hmm. Well, Santa Fe was more to the prior as well. It was a person that was
I don't even
basically
remember
taking it
that
up.
one. Jeez.
That's right down the street. It's 10 miles this way.
Oh, that one. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
You said Santa Fe, and I was thinking Santa Fe, New Mexico. What the hell happened there?
No, Santa
Okay.
Fe,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, he went in. He was the young Greek kid that was
Yeah.
on
Yeah. I forgot about that one.
serious medication because he was bullied in high school. But he went in and he took out all the football players and stuff who were the people that were responsible for it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, from a understanding standpoint, you can, but from understanding, this okay. So we've talked about empathy versus compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding and justification are two different things.
Yes.
They're completely two different things. Understanding is putting yourself in that person's mind. Justification is you doing the same thing they did. I understand Hamas. I do not justify it.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't react to the same way they did.
That's a good point. And I think that's a good place to wrap it up there. Of that's the starting point that anyone needs to think about and then discuss this issue. And I'm not seeing a lot. There's way too much team jersey, politics as sports going on here of, rah, rah, this side or that side. And it's no, we need to, circling all the way back to where we started here is what's the truth? To me, you know, where Williamson was wrong and where Kissin should have focused in more was he right or was he wrong? It wasn't just that people were upset because of all this other stuff going on. It's Harris was objectively wrong.
Well, he did say I disagreed with him, and I think it was clear in that clip.
Yes.
Which is true. But at the same time, and this is okay. So for those that don't watch Modern Wisdom, this is actually as political as it's ever gotten in a long time. And Trigger actually is kind of back and forth. It's more about social issues, but they are a little bit, it's the opposite of what you would find on mainstream media where the interviewer becomes combative, right? Even when they disagree, they're still all nice.
Yes.
And they let people say their piece, which in the situation with Sam is he basically kept shoving his own foot in his own mouth. And I think that was what was so huge about it. Had it been a combative interview, it wouldn't have had the same effect. The fact that they just let him talk and let him keep shoving that foot further and further and further down his mouth, that was what made it so powerful. Because it was like, oh, so this is what you really think. You're not being reactive. You're actually telling us what you believe.
And at some point he needs to have it. And the bigger picture, all of us need to have, okay, wait a minute. Was I right there? Is that true? Is it mostly right? Is it mostly wrong? Is it half and half? Let me critically evaluate this. And there's not a lot of critical evaluation going on just about any issue. And the people like, Whitlock is an example. The people who do want to step back and try and think critically, they get attacked from multiple sides. It's, no, it's, you got to have this team jersey or that team jersey, or you're a terrible person. And then you've got the, people on the outside going, no, you're all terrible. Everything is awful. Black pill, whatever the hell that even means. And it's, can we just
Well, black pill
think and
means you've
talk
been
three.
red pilled, but you're pessimistic about it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
can we just think and talk openly and honestly and critically so that we can come to conclusions that aren't awful? Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, actually.
Okay. Well, in that case,
Well,
we're gonna say goodbye there because
well,
you have studying
this
to
might
do
be
and I have
uh,
drugs to take.
this might be a teaser for next time or just something I throw out there. But the story that came up while we were talking that I wanted to try to segue with sex was breaking news. The ACLU is suing Tennessee because Tennessee made a law against sex workers that know they have HIV from, so it's basically an added charge. So sex work is already illegal, which I don't agree with. I agree that sex work
Yeah,
should be legal. So you know where I'm coming from on this side of this. But if you know you have HIV,
that should be that
that
shouldn't apply to just set workers. That should be to everyone. If I
the law is
knowingly would
apparently called
infect you with a deadly
aggravated
disease.
prostitution.
Oh,
So like
jeez.
aggravated assault. Well, it should be aggravated assault and prostitution should be legal, in my view. But that's the thing about places that have legal sex work. So when we were at Nuremberg Castle, we went in the wrong entrance because we had kids. It would have been an okay entrance if there were no kids there, but we went in the wrong entrance and it was the little red light spot.
Oh no.
And there were girls in the window and stuff. And we're like, oh, let's just keep walking this way, just keep walking this way.
Yeah,
But it's
there.
legal there, but part of the legality of it and the people who fight for legality of sex work is they're tested. They have to go through this process of licensing to make sure that they're not going to be spreading these sexually transmitted diseases, whether it's HIV or monkeypox or any of these other things. Yeah, libertarians are cool with some regulation if it allows for the greater freedom. And what the ACLU is doing right now is, I'm sorry, I'm going to use a word that's going to get us banned, retarded. Yeah, if you knowingly have a life-threatening illness and you do not inform the person you are exposing that to, yes, I agree that should be a crime. Don't try to use that against me on my COVID stance because I've always been to the stance that COVID is not a life-threatening illness for most people. And if you have COVID, don't go see grandma. But
If you're sick, don't go see grandma.
what if it says stay home if you're sick, come over if you're thick? You know, it's that's how it goes. And if you have HIV, guess what? You're no longer allowed to knowingly even not only have sex with people that don't know, but charge them for it.
Yeah.
This is a business regulation, not a personal regulation here.
Yikes. All right. Well, we'll talk about that next time. Maybe we'll get into some sexy time stuff because we haven't talked about that in a while. But next time, we will be into the slog with Perrin's storyline and Crossroads of Twilight.
Do I have to read it?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I'll start it after this test tonight. I don't want to fill my brain with things that
Hey,
annoy
look,
me before.
as bad as it is, it's still a million times better than the series. So look on the bright side.
This is absolutely true. And actually, there were comments about Matt being a slog on the last episode. And I don't 100% disagree with Scott on this one. The only thing is, I think Jordan kind of got with this book, kind of got into a place where he wanted to set up a lot of things and he ended up setting himself up to have to explain a lot.
Yes.
And with the parent thing, because he completely switched on all the stuff that happened in book 4, he had to explain so much and he used a storyline to do it. And I think that just kind of just prolonged the agony,
Yeah.
but I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we will be slogging through that next time. And then next week, Wednesday, we'll have some sexy time maybe.
Oh, I love sexy time.
See y'all
All
then.
right. Later.